Hello once again, everyone. This is the part 2 video for our monopolistically competitive market structure. We have done 4 of them now. All 4 market structures will be completed after this video. The first one, of course, we did was perfectly competitive markets. The second one that we looked at was monopolies. The third one was oligopoly market structures. And then this one is the final one that we've wrapped up, which is monopolistically competitive markets. So what we've looked at before in the last video, if you haven't seen it, you should go back and watch that. That shows us how you graph. Okay, so how do we graph monopolistically competitive markets? And what is a monopolistically competitive market structure? And what we saw is that it has characteristics of both something that is competitive and then both something that is also monopolistic. So what we saw is that in the short run, firms in this market structure can have profit. And in fact, their profit, especially when we graph it, looks identical to a monopoly. However, what we've seen is that in the short run, firms will join that industry and that industry will become saturated, which causes the demand curve for that industry to shift. So if you think about the example that we have discussed is if you think about an area that has restaurants. Let's say there are 5 restaurants in the area. All right, so each of those restaurants, maybe one of them is a high-end dining Italian food restaurant. It's the only one there. There's 5 of them, and that's the only restaurant that has Italian food. What we saw is that as the demand increases, or rather as profit increases, all of a sudden somebody thinks to themselves, gosh, I want to open up a restaurant in that area. They're doing really well. They have profits. And so they open up, let's say, a Thai restaurant. Well, clearly, Thai food is not the same as Italian food, so both of them have a monopoly, if you will, of their respective cuisine. However, if you open a 6th restaurant in that area, think to yourself, what's going to happen to the demand for the restaurants currently in that area? Clearly, that's going to decrease the demand for our Italian restaurant. Why? Because people are going to have diversify their type of utility. They're going to want to go to the Thai restaurant from time to time. So what we see is this ebb and flow. If there's profit to be had, people will join the market. If there's a loss, people will leave the market, which changes the demand. All of that being said is that at the end of the day, in a monopolistically competitive market, in the long run, firms are earning normal profit or zero economic profit, right? So even though it's a markup price, just like a monopoly, they're going to be experiencing normal profit. So that's what we've looked at in part 1. Part 2, we're going to talk about how then do these firms interact with one another? How do they try to entice people to buy their product as opposed to other ones? Well, the answer is going to be in advertising. So when firms sell differentiated products and they charge prices that are above marginal costs, which is what we just saw is the reality when it comes to monopolistically competitive markets, each firm has an incentive to advertise in order to attract more buyers into its particular product. In other words, we need to have a signal, an economic signal, which will entice people to buy my product as opposed to a different product. Think about movie trailers, right? Movies are a monopoly in themselves. Nobody else has that movie, that story, right? There might be ones that are similar, but they have a monopoly of that film. But think about how many times you see movie trailers online or on TV, right? What's the point of that? The point is to get the viewers to see it and think, oh, that is going to be unique. I want to see that one. I'm going to spend my money buying that experience as opposed to another movie. All right, there's tons of movies in a movie theater. What makes you pick one over the other? Well, a lot of times it's advertisement. Imagine if there was no movie trailers. None of them. Imagine if you knew nothing about the movies and all of a sudden you just looked at the sheet of paper and you thought, all right, I'm just going to pick one at random. Well, clearly that's never going to happen. So somehow advertising is going to play a role in monopolistically competitive market. Firms that sell highly differentiated consumer goods typically spend about 10 to 20% of revenue on advertising alone. Well, in microeconomics, we've looked at marginal cost and marginal revenue, and hopefully your eyes are popping out a little bit when you see that, right? Marginally speaking, 10 to 20% of your revenue just in advertisement, that's a lot of money, right? That's a ton of money. And what we see is that overall, in the US economy, about 2% of total revenue is spent on advertising. So $2 billion a year is spent trying to convince you that you should buy something and buy their product. Psychologically, right? Think about that. $200 billion a year is spent trying to sway how you think about something. Fun fact for you, if you know, it's highly expensive to buy a commercial for the Super Bowl. So I'm wondering, just think to yourself, how much does a 30-second commercial cost for the Super Bowl? How much does a 30-second commercial cost for the Super Bowl? Well, the answer is that, at least for this most recent Super Bowl, it cost upwards over $5 million. $5 million for a 30-second commercial. You know the crazy thing about that? It also means that they are anticipating at least $5 million worth of revenue increase because of that commercial. Otherwise, they would never do it. That's crazy. Okay? $5 million for 30 seconds. So let's talk a little bit about the debate over advertising. I'll be honest, much of this advertising is more for your own interest and benefit. I don't know how much of this will be on the AP test. Some of it may be, so you need to know it. But by and large, this is just for your own point of interest because it kind of gives you a holistic understanding of this market structure. Critics of advertising are going to say that firms advertise in order to manipulate people's tastes, right? Trying to convince you that something is good or trying to convince you to buy their product and not another one. They argue that it impedes competition, right? You're implying that products are more different than they truly are. Okay, think about just commercials that you see on TV, or even, for example, think about McDonald's versus Burger King, right? They've got advertisements, or Taco Bell, or any fast food joint, right? You watch their television commercials and you think to yourself, man, that Whopper is so much better than McDonald's, or that Big Mac is so much better than a Whopper, or whatever you have. And the reality is that by and large, their product is not that different. And yes, you could get into an argument about the finer details of it, but by and large, they sell a very similar product, right? A fast food burger joint. But the amount of advertisement tries to convince the viewers that yes, their products are substantially different and mine is substantially better than another one. On the flip side, defenders of advertising are going to say that advertising provides really valuable information to consumers. They're going to say that advertising increases competition. And we'll get to the information here in a little bit. But it's going to increase competition because it provides a greater variety of products and prices. Think especially in the dawn of the kind of technological revolution we have with phones. The fact that you have all of this new product advertisements on your phone that you interact with, you probably wouldn't have seen even 15 years ago. So it actually allows more competition. Smaller firms that you maybe otherwise would not have been aware of, you now see their advertisement and can interact with them. So in some regards, defenders of advertising would say it promotes competition. We get to see more products than we would have if we didn't have advertising. Going back to talking about the information that you can get from advertising, something that, for the record, you may see this on the AP test. Of all of this, when it comes to advertising, this is one that you may actually see. But the idea that advertisements can provide information to consumers, we call that signaling. So the willingness of a firm to spend advertising dollars can be a signal to consumers about the quality of that product being offered. Think about your Super Bowl commercial, okay? Your Super Bowl commercials, you have car companies that are spending millions of dollars on advertisement just to tell you about my Chevy Silverado or my Ford F-150 or what have you. To the consumer, that signals something to you. What it should tell you, whether you're conscious of it or not, is you are thinking that, man, Chevy and Ford have enough money. They are successful enough. Their product is standardized and good enough that they can spend $5 million on advertisement. They can spend 10 to 20% of their revenue just on advertisement. That means that their product is good, right? Companies in which their products are not high quality and they don't get a lot of revenue can't afford to do a Super Bowl ad. So, and again, it doesn't have to be the Super Bowl ad, it can be advertisement in another way, but it still does provide you with the same information. If I see lots of advertisements, I can infer that this company is successful enough and therefore their product is good, right? Which leads us to thinking about brand names. Critics are going to say that brand names are bad, right? Brand names give consumers a perceived difference that don't really exist. I'm sure you can think of a million of them off the top of your head right now. Just think about even what you interact with or your friends interact with on a daily basis. Are there brand names when it comes to the type of phone you have, the type of clothing you wear, the car that you have, the this or that? Are there types of brand names that people want because they can say that they have that brand? Critics are going to say that's not healthy. Critics are going to say that gives you a perceived difference when the reality is that maybe this isn't actually that markedly different than another product. I think the one that we see most commonly is clothing, right? That there's brand clothing, and the reality is it's the same fabric, it's probably made in the same country, and it serves the same utility purpose, right? It covers you and keeps you warm. Some economists, on the other hand, may argue that brand names are useful because it ensures that the goods they are buying are of a high quality. Well, that's an interesting concept. If you think about eating establishment, we'll talk about McDonald's again. Let's say that you go to McDonald's and you have a bad experience with their food. If you have a bad experience with your food, then you might say, I am never going back to McDonald's. Well, think about what that does to McDonald's. That means that not only did they lose a customer for maybe the next month where you would have gone to McDonald's, they may have lost a customer for life. And that means they lost, who knows, hundreds of times that you may have gone to McDonald's over the course of your lifetime that you no longer will because of that one bad experience, right? So the fact that it's a brand name, the fact that it is a household name that is recognizable, really incentivizes them to make sure that their product is good because they know one bad experience means that we're going to lose a customer for a long, long time. Let me give you an example of the flip side. If you've ever driven up north, there is an awesome burger place called Gordy's Hi Hat. It's amazing food. Love that place. But let's say you're driving all the way up 35. You're going up to, I don't know, International Falls, and you're passing Gordy's Hi Hat, and you decide, maybe you've never heard of it before, and you decide, I'm going to pull off and I'm going to eat a double bacon cheeseburger, which is so good. And you pull in and you eat it, and let's say for some reason you get sick from it, okay? And you're thinking, oh my gosh, I feel terrible. I am never going to that place again. Well, does that really impact Gordy's Hi Hat all that much? If you don't live in that area, you may only drive by that place, I don't know, once, twice in your lifetime, right? And it's out of the way enough that you probably wouldn't make it a destination, even if you did like it. Even if you liked it, you still might not go back again. But you had a bad experience, you say, I'm never going to Gordy's Hi Hat again. To them, that doesn't necessarily impact a ton. Think about how that compares to our McDonald's scenario. If you go to McDonald's and at McDonald's you have a bad experience, I promise you, you will be driving by more McDonald's in your lifetime. You can't go to other countries without seeing McDonald's again. So that brand name, an economist might argue, ensures that the quality has to be good, or if not even good, at least consistent with expectations. Hopefully that makes sense. It provides information about quality, giving firms incentive to maintain high quality. So that's close to wrapping it up here for us for monopolistic competition. I want you to take a second to look at this. As you review for our test, remember that these are on at the end of all of our market structure PowerPoints. But I've broken down your three. Okay, you've got perfect competition, you have monopolistic competition, and you have monopoly. You've got your three columns. I've left off oligopoly because, again, as we've talked about before, that one's a little unique, it's a little different. But you've got the different goals for the firm. You have maximizing profits, maximizing profits, maximizing profits. That is the number one goal of every firm. And how do they do that? What do you notice right there? Look for the rule of maximizing. MR equals MC, MR equals MC, MR equals MC. It's the same goal. The goal is to maximize profits. How do they do it? In the same way. They look at where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And what we see is that in the short run, all three of those market structures can earn profits. The difference takes place when we start talking about long run. So there's your differences for you. You've got price taker, price. What about the number of firms? Entry in the long run. Can you earn economic profits in the long run? The only one that you can is going to be a monopoly. And in the monopoly, we don't really differentiate a whole lot between short and long run. So here's a nice breakdown of the similarities and differences between the three major graphical market structures. So a quick review summary for us. Monopolistically competitive market is characterized by three attributes: many firms, differentiated products, and a free entry, right? No barriers to entry or exit. That equilibrium in the monopolistically competitive market differs from perfectly competitive in that firms have excess capacity, just like a monopoly, and each firm charges a price above marginal cost. Monopolistically competitive firms do not have all the desirable properties of perfectly competitive. We have our standard deadweight loss of a monopoly because we've got that markup of price, right? Transactions that could and would and should have occurred don't get to happen because we have a monopoly-like structure, which causes a markup of price and a reduction of output. So the number of firms can be too large or too small. And the product differentiation, which is inherent in our monopolistically competitive market, leads to the use of advertising and brand names. And again, critics argue that advertising and brand names can take advantage of consumers irrationally, right, and irresponsibly, I might add, and to reduce competition. However, defenders would say, hey, advertising and brand names actually informs consumers, right? It's a form of signaling, and it competes more vigorously on prices and product quality.